He was a war hero, a brilliant lawyer, a charismatic speaker. But by the end of his rule, the Philippines was drowning in debt, human rights abuses, and despair. This is the story of Ferdinand Marcos, how he rose to power, how he ruled with an iron fist, and how the Filipino people finally stood up to take their country back. Ferdinand Marcos took office in 1965 with a promise to make the Philippines great. He was intelligent, ambitious, and determined. He boasted of being a World War II hero, a claim later exposed as exaggerated, but at the time, it helped him build an image of strength. Under his first term, the country saw a burst of infrastructure development. Roads, bridges, schools, and hospitals. The economy was growing, and so was Marcos's political capital, but the signs of excess were already there. In 1969, he became the first Philippine president to be re-elected. But it came at a cost. His campaign was the most expensive in history, fueled by foreign loans and crony support. The economy overheated. Inflation soared. Social unrest simmered. The early 1970s were a time of chaos. Students protested in the streets. Communist insurgency and Muslim separatist groups gained strength. Crime was rising. Marcos used this chaos to his advantage. He portrayed himself as the only leader who could save the republic. In 1972, after an alleged assassination attempt on Defense Secretary Juan Ponce Enrile, now widely believed to have been staged, Marcos declared martial law. He claimed it was for national security. In reality, it was a power grab. With martial law in effect, Marcos ruled by decree. Congress was abolished. The free press was silenced. Political opponents, including Senator Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr., were jailed or exiled. Marcos promised a new society, a vision of discipline, reform, and progress. He launched massive infrastructure projects, highways, cultural centers, power plants. The First Lady, Imelda Marcos, took on diplomatic and cultural missions abroad, promoting the regime's image. But beneath the surface was a darker reality. Thousands were tortured, abducted, and killed. Human rights groups estimate over 70,000 arrests, 35,000 torture victims, and more than 3,000 killed. The military expanded its power, corruption flourished, and a small circle of cronies grew fantastically rich, while millions remained poor. During the 1970s, the Philippine economy grew, on paper. Funded by massive foreign loans, the regime built dams, roads, and even the controversial Bataan nuclear power plant. GDP rose, and Imelda's edifice complex, grandiose buildings and vanity projects, dominated Manila's skyline. But this growth was unsustainable. The loans had to be repaid, and by the 1980s, the global economy turned. Interest rates soared, the peso collapsed. Between 1983 and 1985, the economy shrank by nearly 15%, the worst contraction in post-war Philippine history. Poverty deepened, inflation destroyed savings, the middle class shrank. The illusion of prosperity crumbled. While ordinary Filipinos struggled, the Marcos inner circle amassed billions. The Presidential Commission on Good Government, PCGG, would later uncover US $5 to $10 billion siphoned from the national treasury. Imelda Marcos became infamous for her lavish spending, from New York shopping sprees to a collection of over 1,000 pairs of shoes. The Marcoses weren't just corrupt, they were theatrical. But behind the spectacle, Filipinos were beginning to resist. Underground newspapers, the Mosquito Press, began to expose the truth. The Catholic Church, led by courageous bishops, started speaking out. Labor unions, students, indigenous communities, and journalists, once silent, found their voice. The assassination of Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr. in 1983, as he returned from exile, became a turning point. In 1986, under pressure from the US and international lenders, Marcos called for snap elections. His opponent, Corazon Cory Aquino, the widow of Ninoy. The elections were marred by fraud and violence, but when the people saw the blatant cheating, they took to the streets. For 4 days in February 1986, millions gathered along Idisa. Armed only with prayers, rosaries, and flowers, they faced tanks and soldiers, and won. The Marcos regime collapsed. On February 25, 1986, Ferdinand and Imelda fled to Hawaii. A dictator had fallen. A democracy had risen. The Marcos era remains one of the most controversial and impactful periods in Philippine history. It was a time of ambition and abuse, of modernity and manipulation, and though the People Power Revolution brought back democracy, the lessons of that era remain vital today. Because the struggle for truth, justice, and freedom is never truly over.
Emmanuel Idralin Marcos. His name evokes two starkly different images in the Philippines and around the world. To some, he was a brilliant leader who brought order and progress to a struggling nation. To others, he was a dictator who plundered his country and ruled with an iron fist. So, who was the real Ferdinand Marcos? Today, we'll explore his life, his rise to power, and the legacy he left behind. Born in 1917, Marcos was a gifted student and a decorated soldier, although some of his wartime claims have been disputed. He was a brilliant lawyer who entered politics and quickly rose through the ranks, serving in the House of Representatives and the Senate. His political career culminated in 1965 when he was elected the 10th president of the Philippines. In his first term, he launched ambitious infrastructure projects, building roads, bridges, and hospitals that were long overdue. The country saw a period of economic growth and national development.
Of Arsenio Barasacan, who has published one of the greatest studies behind Marcos's tenure as president. Barasacan is known to many as the Secretary of National Economic and Development Authority, serving both under President Benigno Aquino and current President Bongbong Marcos. Despite serving under current President Marcos, he has shed light on the actual history about his father. President Ferdinand Marcos's economic policies weren't great. They were actually a huge reason why the Philippines had become a lagging economy, and here's how. One of the key major components of the Marcos presidency is fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is a country's national budget. It is where infrastructures, social services, and economic strategies are planned and funded. During the 1970s, the public sector under Marcos had expanded significantly. This was driven by a perceived need to accelerate growth through increased public goods, particularly infrastructure. However, President Marcos did not just utilize these large projects for public gain, but rather for patronage and largesse. These terms mean that the funds allocated for public projects were often used to gain political favor and reward loyal supporters. Therefore, by the decade's end, the strategy became unsustainable, which exacerbated the country's national debt problems. The Philippine national debt grew astoundingly and made the country vulnerable to external shocks. Hence, by the early 1980s, the Philippines saw a big drop in its economy. Data from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, shows that the GDP per capita of the Philippines dropped from $774 in 1980 to $615 by 1986. Although the economy of the Philippines was harmed by foreign and external shocks, the depth-driven growth and patronage politics that the Marcos administration used had exacerbated these. But some argue that it wasn't really Marcos's fault. This was because of external shocks in general. They blame that the reason why the Philippine economy performed poorly was due to commodity prices plummeting. The world economy under former President Marcos saw sugar prices plummet in 1974 and 75, coconut prices in 79 and 80, and oil prices surging in 79 and 80. But you should still understand that a big part of Marcos's tenure was relying heavily on overseas borrowings. He and his administration key on borrowing money, which is why by 1986, the end of his tenure, the Philippines' foreign debt had hit a record $28 billion. What harmed the Philippines was the world interest rates rose sharply in the early 1980s. This meant that the Philippines had to pay a lot more interest for these foreign borrowings. Even if you want to blame external shocks for his administration, you should look at neighboring countries. Thailand in the 1970s and Indonesia in the mid-1980s also faced severely sharp declines, yet they had survived. These were mere temporary setbacks and not crises. The Philippines, however, took a longer time to actually get back on its feet. How so? Again, it's because of debt. Barasakan said that much of the problems in the Philippines did not actually stem from the borrowing strategy of Marcos, but rather from the uneconomic projects funded by that borrowed money. What does that mean? It means that the projects under Marcos were not provided enough for the country in terms of their cost. This is one of the most debated reasons why Marcos is a hero to some, because he has built infrastructures like no other. Yet, the current NEDA secretary says that these were uneconomical and had harmed the Philippines. Ally of Marcos, Lucio Tan, and several other alleged cronies had been dismissed in 2012. The body known as Sandiaban, which is jurisdiction over criminal and civil cases involving graft and corrupt practices, said that the Republic did not meet the burden of proving that the assets and properties were ill-gotten wealth, as it was not demonstrated that they originated from government sources. Further, the body found no proof that respondent Tan received concessions or that his business ventures benefited from Marcos. It held that the Republic failed to demonstrate how Marcos' grant of favors and privileges to a corruption resulted in the government's ownership of its shares, assets, and properties that may be received as ill-gotten wealth. This has been a movement that many support. This, as they say, proves that Marcos did not have any ill-gotten wealth, but it is a fact that the Philippine government has indeed recovered sums of money from them. They have lost several other cases filed against them, and while some have failed or overturned, the other cases show that they have indeed plundered the country on one way or another. Data from the Presidential Commission on Good Government shows that from 1986 to 2021, over 174 billion pesos were recovered. Where did this money come from? It is of course no other than the Marcos family. Finally, one of the largest arguments for Marcos is nationalization. The Marcos administration took control of several private companies. This meant that rather than private businesses taking over, it is now the government. The argument by many is that the government would provide better equality for many and would help devoid of creating oligarchs. This is one of the arguments made after the Marcos administration. It is that the succeeding presidency of Corazon and other presidents had privatized these businesses. Privatizing a business simply means that the government would no longer control a business, but rather it is now the private sector. The National Steel Corporation, NSC, was a sample for this controversy. It was argued that because the government had now sold their businesses to private individuals, it was caused the NSC and many other corporations to either go bankrupt or be mismanaged. Unfortunately, free market capitalism says otherwise. Free market capitalism emphasizes minimal government intervention, allowing market forces to dictate the production, distribution, and pricing of goods and services. This simply means that the government must not intervene in the private sector and let people decide. This is not a bad thing, because it has been the proven framework that has made many nations rich globally. While the NSC has failed because of private companies, it might also be because the NSC was no longer a viable economic.
Tinawag na Golden Age ang panahon ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos. Totoo nga kayang napakadakila at napakamaasenso ng kalagayan noon ng Pilipinas? Halina at ating balikan ang mga proyekto at mga nagawa ni Pangulong Ferdinand P. Marcos at ating alamin kung nakatulong nga ba talaga ito para sa ikauunlad ng ating bansa. Lahat ng yan ay ating pag-uusapan. Halos 20 taong panunungkulan ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos ay hindi matatawaran ang mga nagawa niya para sa ating bansa at para sa ating mga Pilipino. Lahat ng sektor ng lipunan ay talagang pinag-ukulan niya ng panahong may saayos at ma-improve upang nang sa gayon ay makinabang ang mga susunod na henerasyon. Alam mo ba na ang militar natin ay isa sa mga iniilagan ng mga bansa noon dahil sa taglay ng lakas ng puwersang militar natin? Ito ay dahil sa mga proyektong inilaan ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos upang ma-improve ng todo ang ating sandatahang lakas. Ang ilan sa mga proyektong ito ay ang pag-modernize ng AFP sa pamamagitan ng pagtatayo ng Defense Self-Reliant Rocket Launchers, Hummingbirds Helicopters, Bongbong 1 and Bongbong 2 rocket missiles, Santa Barbara Secret and Highly Classified Philippine Missile o First Rocket Philippines na isinagawa katulong ang mga Pilipinong siyentista at Philippine Navy. The Bukang Liwayway Rocket Projects, Anti-Typhoon Rockets 1973, Makakatulong sana ito sa pagpigil sa mga malalakas na bagyo, ngunit nawi lamang sa wala dahil hindi inasikaso ng pumalit na presidente pagkatapos ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos. The Blue Diamonds, isa rin ito sa kinatatakutan ng ibang bansa noon, kaya lahat ng isla natin noon ay may karatula na kapag may tumungtong na ibang lahi sa isla na yon, siguradong pauulanan, kaya walang nagtatangkang dumaong sa mga isla ng Pinas. Blue Diamonds, the best combatant pilots in Asia. Ang Pilipinas din noon ay nakikipagsabayan sa mga malalakas na bansa, kaya tinawag tayong the Rising Tiger of Asia. T-610 Kali Super Pinto o Philippine-made supersonic jets. Pugo Philippine-made hovercraft, hospital ship, sumpak missile tracks, mobile rocket launchers, Defiant 100 to 500, Project Kalabaw Philippine-made utility aircraft, Defiant 300 Philippine Secret Project Light Attack Aircraft 1988, PAF tanks, PAF flying boats, 6x6 Whaled Combat Bongbong 1 missile track launcher, warships, warplanes 35 F-8 Crusaders, 37 F-5 fighter jets, F-8H Crusaders, 25 F-86 Sabres, hydrofoil patrol boats, the Defender of Philippine Sea, RPS Katatagan 120-footer, the Guardian of the Philippine Sea, RPS Bagong Lakas, RPS SM o Philippine Navy ship at Spratly Island, OV-10 Bronco Light Bomber, C-130 planes and C-123. Ito ang naiambag ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos sa ating lakas militar. Kaya hindi nakataka-taka kung bakit pinangingilagan tayo noon na mga kalapit na mga bansa natin. Hindi lamang yan, sa usapin naman tungkol sa infrastruktura, pagpapatayo ng mga daanan at mga proyekto tungkol sa transportasyon ay hindi rin magpapahuli dyan si Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos. Ito ang kanyang mga nagawa tungkol sa mga proyektong ito. Manila International Airport na naging Ninoy Aquino International Airport, PNR o Extension Project, LRT-1 o MRT, Next Project Bullet Train, first in Southeast Asia rin sana. Kaso, alam niyo na, monorail was the original plan of Marcos instead of LRT. SLEX and NLEX, first in Southeast Asia. Coastal Road Tollway o Cavitex, Heart Center of the Philippines, Kidney Center o National Kidney and Transplant Institute, Philippines Lung Center, PGH, 1981 Renovation Project, Children Hospital, Nayong Filipino, Coconut Palace, Palace in the Sky o People's Park, PICC, Film Center, Golden Mosque for Muslims, Magiling Center of the Arts o National Arts Center, Fox Arts Theater, San Juanico Bridge, the longest bridge in the Philippines, the Manila Planetarium, Kaluwit Safari Farm, Palawan, MTRCB, NEDA, PTIC, Metro Manila Double-Decker Buses. Noong panahon ni Marcos, double-decker bus na tayo, Love Bus o 1970s air-conditioned buses that will only stop to load and unload passengers at designated stops. Disiplinado noon, bawal ang agawan sa sakayan. Motor Co double-decker bus, Metro Mega Bus, 400 capacity buses fly EDSA, MAN Super Bus, Ferry Boat Rail Link. Ganito kagara ang mga transportasyon vehicles sa panahon ni Marcos. Ngayon, yung iba dito sa ibang bansa na natin makikita. Alam mo rin ba na ang gobyerno ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos ay nagpatibay din ng isang programa kung saan ay naglalayon itong mapabuti ang kalusugan at makakuha ng tamang nutrisyon ang mga mamamayan nito, lalo na ang mga batang Pilipino. Ang programang ito ay hindi sulong kilusan ng gobyerno noon, kundi isang malawak na pinagsamang pagsisikap o pwersa mula sa ating gobyerno at ng pribadong sektor na kilala bilang USAID na mula sa US upang maiwasan ang malnutrisyon sa ating bansa. Naniniwala ang gobyerno ng Pilipinas sa pamumuno ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos na ang malnutrisyon ay hadlang sa pag-unlad sa ating human resource at inaasahan na kung ipa-prioritize ng gobyerno ang problema sa nutrisyon ay makakatiyak tayo na ang mga susunod na henerasyon ng mga mag-aaral ay malaki ang potensyal na maging isang mahusay na manggagawa at malaki ang maiaambag dito sa ating bansa. Ang iba't ibang mga aktibidad tungkol sa nutrisyon dito sa Pilipinas ay batay sa kooperasyon at pakikipagtulungan sa pagitan ng gobyerno at ng ilang pribadong sektor. Ang ilan sa problemang sinagutan agad ng Pangulong Marcos ay ay ang protein energy malnutrition o PEM sa mga batang preschool. Lumalabas noong 1970 sa mga pag-aaral na ang kadalasang naaapektuhan ng PEM ay ang mga bata mula sa mga lugar sa Eastern at Western Visayas. Ang mga kahihinatnan ng kakulangan sa nutrisyon na ito ay ang mabagal na paglaki o paglago ng pisikal na katawan ng bata, mababang enerhiya at mas prone sa sakit ang mga batang kulang sa tamang nutrisyon. Ang isa pang kahihinatnan na madalas na napapansin ay ang emotional at psikolohikal na epekto sa lipunan, kung ang karamihan ng mga kabataan ay nakakadanas ng kakulangan sa timbang. At noong 1971 ay nagsagawa ng programa ang gobyerno na tinawag na Operation Timbang, kung saan naglalayon ito na mapaunti at mawala ang kakulangan sa nutrisyon ng ilang bata. At ang isang kasangkapan na ginamit ng programang ito ay ang napakalaki at napakasarap na Nutriban. Marahil kung ikaw ay elementary pa lang ng taong 70s o 80s ay malamang na naabutan mo rin ang Nutriban bread na ito. Ginawa ang tinapay na ito hindi lang para busugin ang mga mag-aaral noon, kundi para malabanan din ang malnutrisyon. Ang Nutriban ay hindi pangkaraniwang tinapay lang na mabibili mo katulad ng nakasanayang pandesal, dahil di hamak na mas malaki, mas malasa at mas masustansya ang tinapay na ito dahil dinisenyo ito para talaga magbigay nutrisyon sa mga bata. Katuwang ang samahang USAID at sa pamumuno ni Ferdinand Marcos ay nagawa nilang mabigyan ng supply ng Nutriban ang bawat elementary school sa bawat rehiyon sa ating bansa. Ang bawat piraso ng isang Nutriban ay tumitimbang ng 80 grams at naglalaman ng halos 400 calories. Kaya kahit isang piraso lang nito ang kainin mo ay tiyak na mabilis kang mabubusog. Wait, there's more! Narito rin ang mga power plants na ipinatayo ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos. Number 1. Bataan Nuclear Power Plant, completed 1983. Number 2. Leyte Geothermal Power Plant, completed 1977. Number 3. Makiling Banahaw Geothermal Power Plant, completed 1979. Number 4. Tiwi Geothermal Power Plant, completed 1980. Number 5. Angat Hydroelectric Power Plant, completed 1967. Number 6. Kalayaan Hydroelectric Power Plant, completed 1982. Number 7. Magat A Hydroelectric Power Plant, completed 1984. Number 8. Magat B Hydroelectric Power Plant, completed 1984. Number 9. Pantabangan Hydroelectric Power Plant, completed 1977. Number 10. Agos 2 Hydroelectric Power Plant, completed 1979. Number 11. Agos 4 Hydroelectric Power Plant, completed 1985. Number 12. Agos 5 Hydroelectric Power Plant, completed 1985. Number 13. Agos 7 Hydroelectric Power Plant, completed 1982. Number 14. Pulangi Hydroelectric Power Plant, completed 1985. Number 15. Agos 6 Hydroelectric Power Plant, recommissioned in 1977. Number 16. Masiway Hydroelectric Power Plant, completed 1980. Number 17. Main Magat Hydroelectric Power Plant, completed 1983. Number 18. Kalaka Coal Power Plant, completed in 1984. Number 19. Cebu Thermal Power Plant, completed in 1981. Number 20. Palinpinon 1 Southern Negros Geothermal Production Field, completed in 1983. At alam mo ba na pagmamay-ari ng gobyerno ang Meralco, pati yung Petron Corporation ay sa gobyerno din dati? Nang mawala si Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos sa pwesto, ay ibinenta ng mga pumalit sa kanya sa mga pribadong kumpanya. Ito ang dahilan kung bakit ang laki-laki ng singil sa atin sa kuryente. Ipinasara din nila lahat, halos na mga power plants na ipinatayo ni Pangulong Marcos, kung kaya't nagtitiis tayo ngayon sa malaking singil sa kuryente ng Meralco. Yung Petron na dating sa gobyerno ay ibinenta sa isang pribadong kumpanya sa Saudi Arabia. Ngayon, nagdudusa ang mga namamasada dahil sa taas ng presyo ng petrolyo. Kung hindi naalis sa pwesto si Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos, tingin mo, dadanasin kaya natin ang kahirapan na nararanasan natin ngayon? At dahil ang ating bansa ay nabibilang sa mga agricultural country, isa tayo noon sa numero 1 exporter ng bigas sa mga kalapit nating bansa katulad ng Vietnam at South Korea. Ang katunayan niyan ay tayo pa nga ang nagtuturo noon sa mga Koreano kung papaano ang tamang pagtatanim upang mayroon silang makain at maibenta. Ngayon, tignan mo, napag-iwanan na tayo ng South Korea. Sobrang advanced na ng kanilang ekonomiya, samantalang dati lamang na lamang tayo sa kanila sa agrikultura. Ito ang nakakalungkot na realidad natin ngayon. Kung sana ay patuloy nating niyakap ang ating agrikultura, hindi sana ay malago din ang ating ekonomiya ngayon. Noong nakapwesto pa si Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos ay mahigpit niyang ipinagbabawal ang pag-i-import ng mga bigas mula sa ibang bansa dahil sobra-sobra ang bigas dito sa atin at dapat tayo ang nag-e-export ng bigas sa ibang bansa. Pero nang mawala sa pwesto si Pangulong Marcos ay nagsimula na tayong mag-import ng mga bigas mula sa ibang mga bansa at napag-iwanan ang ating sariling mga tanim. Ilan lamang yan sa mga dahilan kung bakit tinatawag na Golden Age ang panahon noon ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos. Sana ay muli nating makamit ito upang maranasan naman natin ang kasaganaang tinamasa ng mga Pilipino noong panahong iyon.